All right. So, you guys remember that Jussie Smollett case back in 2019?
Oh, yeah.
The whole staged hate crime thing. Well,
yeah.
The Illinois Supreme Court just overturned his conviction.
Wow.
It's crazy.
Right?
Yeah. So we're diving deep into this Fox News article about it. And basically by the end of this, you're going to have some thoughts about plea deals and the justice system, I think.
Yeah, it's a case with definitely more twists and turns than like an episode of Empire, I think.
Oh, yeah, for sure. But before we get into all that, the Supreme Court stuff,
okay,
let's just make sure we're all on the same page.
Hmm.
You probably remember the basics. Smollett was a black gay actor, and he claimed he was attacked in Chicago by two masked men shouting racist and homophobic slurs.
Yeah, it became a huge story, right away.
Huge. But then remember, Cook County State's Attorney Kim Foxx decided to just drop all the charges.
And that's where I think things got really suspicious for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Seemed like there were some backroom deals and some political stuff going on.
Totally. And so a special prosecutor had to be brought in just to kind of quell the public outcry.
Right.
And that led to Smollett's conviction on 5 felony counts in 2021.
Yeah, he even served some time in jail, right?
150 days.
Yeah.
And now the Illinois Supreme Court just flips the script. It's crazy.
Wild.
I don't even know.
Yeah.
I'm trying to wrap my head around the logic here.
So it all comes down to this legal term, nolle prosequi, which basically means we will no longer prosecute.
Okay.
And so when those initial charges were dropped against Smollett, there was an agreement in place. Like he'd do some community service, forfeit his bond.
Okay.
And then the case would be over.
Mm-hmm.
And he did all that.
Yeah. Okay. So he technically did what he was supposed to.
Right.
But it just feels like this whole thing caused such a big uproar.
Right.
That there should have been more accountability.
I think a lot of people felt that way.
Yeah.
But legally speaking.
Yeah.
The Supreme Court said that bringing in the special prosecutor and all those extra charges, that violated the initial agreement. And they said that violated his due process rights.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the Bill Cosby case a little bit. He kind of had a similar thing.
Yeah.
Where a previous agreement not to prosecute led to his conviction being overturned. Is this a trend or something?
Well, it's interesting you say that because Niyama Rahmani, who's a former federal prosecutor, he actually called Jussie Smollett Bill Cosby 2.0.
Wow.
Now, obviously, he's not saying that, the crimes are the same.
Okay.
But he's arguing that both cases show this kind of pattern of prosecutorial misconduct that really undermines public trust in the justice system.
So it's not even really about whether Smollett faked the attack.
Right.
It's about whether the prosecution followed the rules.
Exactly.
That's a big deal.
Huge. Yeah. Rahmani basically says that this case should make us question, the whole integrity of the system.
Yeah.
Because Smollett never admitted guilt, but technically he fulfilled his part of the deal.
Yeah.
It was the state that, went back on its word by bringing in that special prosecutor.
I bet not everyone agrees with that.
Yeah. I mean, some people are going to say that.
Yeah.
No matter what the legal loopholes are, Smollett's actions still demand accountability. I mean, he put Chicago through this whole ordeal.
Right, it was very public.
Very divisive.
Yeah. It's a really messy situation. But it kind of raises this big question.
Yeah.
What happens when what we think is justice clashes with the actual legal process?
It's a great question. It's going to stay with us for a while, I think. But before we get too philosophical, I think we should look at how this all played out in the courtroom.
Okay. Let's break down how they used the Fifth Amendment and the whole double jeopardy thing to get this victory.
Yeah.
And also, how did this become such a media circus?
Right. It was crazy. Welcome back. So, when we look at the Jussie Smollett case.
Yeah.
It's obvious that this wasn't just a courtroom drama.
Right.
It was like a media circus.
Oh, totally. It was all over the news.
Yeah.
For weeks. Cable news was obsessed. Social media was like a war zone.
Yeah.
Everybody had an opinion. The whole world was watching.
And you know, that intense media coverage, that wasn't just background noise.
Right.
Smollett's lawyers actually argued that it prevented him from getting a fair trial.
It's an interesting point.
Yeah.
Because you think about it,
yeah,
with all that coverage,
yeah,
all those opinions,
right,
how could a juror actually be impartial?
Right.
They would be influenced by everything they saw.
Yeah, totally.
And heard outside the courtroom.
And you have to remember, the special prosecutor was appointed during this, firestorm of public outcry.
Yeah.
And there were allegations of political interference.
Yeah.
So you have to wonder if that even influenced the decision to appoint a special prosecutor in the first place.
It's like a vicious cycle.
Totally.
The media attention fueled public outrage.
Yeah.
Which put pressure on the legal system.
Right.
Which generated more media coverage.
Exactly. And then it becomes like you can't even separate the legal stuff from the public emotion and political agendas.
Right. Which goes back to that whole Romani point about the soft on crime thing.
Totally.
This whole case, regardless of the technicalities, it just became this symbol for that whole narrative.
Totally.
About whether some types of crimes are treated too leniently.
And that narrative is definitely being shaped and amplified by, the media coverage.
By the media, for sure.
Right.
So we have to be careful to not let the media totally dictate what we think about all these complicated cases.
Absolutely. I think we have a responsibility to be like critical thinkers,
Right. Yeah.
Look past the headlines. Yeah. Really try to understand the nuances.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to cases like this.
Right.
Where you have race and sexual orientation and political bias.
It's sensitive.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. It's easy to get caught up in the emotions of the story and just jump to a conclusion without understanding the facts.
It's true. And I think it's really important to remember that cases like this, there are real people at the center of it all.
Right. It's easy to forget that.
Yeah.
Beyond the legal arguments.
Yeah.
Beyond the media. There's Jesse Smollett.
Yeah.
The person.
The actual person. Yeah.
And whether you believe him or not,
right,
he's been through a lot.
Yeah. Public humiliation.
Yeah.
Career setbacks. Legal battles,
yeah,
even jail time. So, even though his conviction was overturned, there's no denying that this has really impacted his life.
Right. It's just a reminder that even when the justice system works the way it's supposed to, there can still be casualties.
Yeah. And sometimes when you pursue justice, there can be unintended consequences.
Yeah.
That can go way beyond the courtroom.
So as we're wrapping up this part of our deep dive,
yeah,
I think we need to acknowledge the human cost of this.
For sure.
Not just for Smollett,
right,
but for everyone.
Everyone, yeah.
The victims, the city, the public.
Even the public.
Whose faith in the system has been shaken.
Totally.
By this whole thing.
It's a story with more questions than answers.
Right. It makes you feel uneasy.
Yeah.
About truth and justice.
Yeah.
And how the media just shapes our perception of it all.
For sure.
There's a lot to think about. But I think there's one more thing that we need to explore. That last question. This whole thing with Smollett, it just shows you how messy things can get.
Oh, yeah.
When justice and politics mix.
Totally. And then you add in the court of public opinion, and it gets even more confusing.
Yeah.
I mean, this case had race.
Yeah.
Sexual orientation, political divides.
Yeah.
It was never going to just be a normal legal matter.
It makes you wonder, right? Is our justice system really blind?
Right.
Like we think it is? Or can outside pressure actually change things?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's a simple answer. Ideally,
the
courts would be totally independent, just using facts and law. But you can't ignore the fact that judges, prosecutors, jurors, they're all people with their own experiences and opinions.
And so it brings us to that final question.
Yeah.
We keep kind of talking about with all these plea deals and overturned convictions.
Right.
It makes us think about this uncomfortable truth. What happens when what we think is fair clashes with how the legal system actually works?
It's a tough one, right? On the one hand, we want laws to be applied the same.
Equally to everyone.
Right. Equally and fairly to everyone.
Yeah.
But we also want justice.
Right.
And those two things don't always match up.
Yeah. It feels like this case is kind of a perfect example of that.
Totally.
Some people are going to see him walking free as just this total miscarriage of justice.
Right.
But others will say it was necessary.
Yeah.
Even if it's frustrating to protect due process, there's no way to make everyone happy.
No, you're right. It's the good and the bad of living in a democracy, I guess.
Right.
You have to deal with these tough issues.
Yeah.
Talk about them and just try to make a system that's both fair and follows the rules.
It's hard. It's hard.
Yeah. So as we wrap this up,
yeah,
what have we learned about Jussie Smollett?
Right.
We looked at all the legal stuff.
Yeah, all the twists and turns.
Media frenzy, the ethical dilemmas.
Mm-hmm.
But I think more importantly,
yeah,
we've used this case to really think about justice and fairness and how we see the legal system.
Yeah, it's a good conversation to have.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't stop just because the news cycle moves on.
Right, for sure.
It's up to all of us to make sure the system is fair and holds people accountable.
Right.
Even in cases like this one.
Yeah, so to everyone listening, keep thinking critically.
Stay informed.
Yeah, stay informed.
Yeah.
Talk to each other.
Have those tough conversations.
Yeah. That's how we figure this out.
That's how we make things better. Yeah.
Yeah, and how we make a more just world for everybody.
Exactly. Until next time, stay curious.